Well, hi, good evening. I'm Kathy Wesley, and I thank all the members and friends of SoCal KTC for inviting me to be here this evening to talk about meditation and Buddha Dharma.
Welcome.
So thanks very much, for being here with us tonight. Since you've already just had a session of meditation, I won't make you do another one just now, but we will have another little mini session of meditation here pretty soon. We're working with this book, this tiny little book. Look how big it is. And it's called A Guide to Shamatha and Vipashyana Meditation, and it's by Kenshin Thrangu Rinpoche. And as if I remember correctly, we are still in the first chapter, and I got up to page 5 this time, the last time, if I remember correctly. And by the way, I may need somebody there in the audience in SoCal to let me know if I'm in the right section or not. My memory was that we finished on page 5 with the section Mind is Most Important. But if anybody sees that I'm in a different, we were a little bit further into the book than that, could you let me know?
I made a note, Lama Kathy, and you're definitely there.
Yay!
I,
As my husband would say, that's one in a row. Okay, great. So, so where I want to start tonight is I first want to find out how meditation has been going for all of you. How is your meditation, and do you have any specific meditation specific questions you want to make sure that we cover tonight? I'm going to go grab a pen. It's right here, 2 steps away. Okay. So if anybody has specific meditation specific questions you want to make sure we cover tonight, does anybody have any? And I'll also look at the chat. And if I don't see any, well, then that's okay too. Okay, how can I tell the difference between letting go and subtly suppressing thoughts or emotions? Ooh, yeah. I like that. Okay. Yes, I can address that. I'll make sure we talk about that. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay. Letting go versus subtly suppressing thoughts and emotions. Okay. And then here's another one. Lately, I've noticed that it says here, lately, I've noticed that when my anxiety spikes, my mind starts running like a rapid fire slideshow. How do I skillfully work with that fast moving mental imagery without getting pulled into it? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. You remember when we were in school, they talked about run on sentences that just went on and on and on and on and on. So we can have a run on mind. Is that okay? Okay. Okay. So the first question is about the difference between letting go and subtly suppressing thoughts and emotions. And then the other one is run on mind. Okay. And how to be skillful. Okay. All right. Anybody else have something you want to make sure we cover tonight? Well, those two are excellent. So we'll see if we can't make sure that we cover those tonight. Because what we're going to talk about first is about what we're working with in meditation, which is our mind. We're working with our own mental experience. And I think I said this, if not last time, the time before, that the Buddha, when he talked about the mind and its manifestations, he talked about it like water and waves. That was one of many examples that he used. The mind was like the ocean or like the water, and the thoughts, feelings, and emotions were like the waves on top. The manifestations of the mind were like the waves. And at no point are the waves separate from water. Waves are always just water. And in fact, the Buddha himself did not differentiate between thoughts, feelings, emotions, and even perception. He didn't differentiate among these. He called them all mental events. Mental events. And so one did not have a greater value. One did not have a greater value than another. In other words, some people tell me that they think that thoughts are sort of low class and emotions and feelings are sort of high class, and we need to pay attention to those. Whereas thoughts, oh, we can disregard thoughts, but emotions and feelings, emotions and feelings come from somewhere else. And therefore we have to give them more gravity or weight. But the Buddha didn't believe that. He said, the mind is like water, and thoughts, feelings, and emotions, they're all the same, and that they're all the waves or the manifestations of that water. And so the practice of shamatha then means, the word shamatha means calm, abiding, calmly abiding. And then the Tibetan word for that, and I'll type it into chat, is shine. Shi means peace, and ne means abiding. And I may have mentioned this in one of the earlier classes. Shine, calm abiding. And the function of the calm abiding practice is to develop the capacity to maintain mindfulness in the face of mental events. To be mindful in the face of the arising of thoughts, feelings, emotions, and perceptions. So this is why the question about suppressing thought or emotion and how to be skillful with a run-on mind, this just fits right in. This fits right in with what we're talking about tonight. Oh, and I see there's another question. Oh, there's two more questions. Okay. How do we discriminate between grasping at results versus recognizing that we are progressing in our practice? Oh, yeah. Okay. That'll be the third question. Grasping for results. Okay. Recognizing progress. Yeah, what's really great is a couple of these questions so far are related to each other, so that's kind of nice. Another person says, it seems as though I have reached a sort of plateau with meditation. I can find a relative level. Stoliness. Stioliness. I wonder if you mean stillness.
Lama Kathy, sorry, I meant stillness.
Oh, stillness. Okay. Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Okay, so the plateau, you won't be the first person to notice that, Richard. Because this is I've heard this from several other people, and in fact, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche mentioned it himself in one of his talks. So okay, I can find a relative level of stillness. But I may sometimes find I'm seeking signs of progress. Oh, okay, right. Seeking signs of progress, though I know I shouldn't. Oh, right. Okay. Oh, good. This is great. Okay. Just keep going is the question. Okay, well, let's find out. Because what we're going to do here shortly is we're going to talk about the practice of calm abiding and how it's done. And then we're going to go through some of your questions and maybe do a little meditation and then handle the questions after, and then talk about the next phase what happens next after a person works with stillness. So yeah, so let's dive in. On page 5 at the bottom, he talks about the mind being the most important. And here, what's really interesting is for those of you who attended Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's teachings on the naturally liberating whatever you meet, the Mahamudra transmission of Khenpo Gangshar, this exact topic is covered in Khenpo Gangshar's outline. He said, Thrangu Rinpoche, it's exactly what Khenpo Gangshar said. We have a body and we have a mind. Because we can see and feel our body, Thrangu Rinpoche says, we tend to think that it's more important. But actually, if we look at our experience closely, he says we will see that our mind is more important. And these are pretty much exact quotes from Khenpo Gangshar. You know, the mind, he says, is like a servant who is employed. The body is, I'm sorry, I said the mind. The body is like a servant employed by the mind, and our mind is the master of this servant. When our mind is happy, we experience well-being, and that extends to our physical body. And I think a lot of people on this call will remember times when they were in a good mood and they almost felt maybe light, you know, sort of a lightness of being. Then also, he says, when our mind is in a positive state, our physical and verbal actions will automatically be positive as well. And when our mind is aware, clear, lucid, our actions will be more effective. I think we've all been there. We've all known what it's like to be active before coffee has kicked in. You know, so we know what it's like to have an unclear mind and then what it feels like to have a clear mind. So he says, working with our mind is extremely important because the Buddha said that it's like the monarch. It tells the mind is what tells the body and the speech what to do. And it's really how we create our patterns. He's at the top of page 6, Thrangu Rinpoche says, he talks about this by saying, working with the mind because it's basically, there's no other way to do this than to work on the habits that we have. And see, and this is going to come into play in our habitual ways of thinking about ourselves are talked about in these in many of the questions we have on our list tonight. And he says we are constantly developing habits and patterns of doing things that may be positive or negative, and the positiveness and the negativeness of it are determined by whether they're motivated by selfishness or by selflessness. If you remember from the Dhammapada, the Buddha explained his teachings on karma by saying that if we think, speak, and act with an impure mind, that suffering is the result. And if we think, speak, and act with a pure mind, happiness is the result. And that this is the most basic statement the Buddha made about karma. And that the difference between the pure and the impure mind is that the mind that is completely caught up in selfishness, and what some people used to call my way or the highway thinking, that tends to cloud our judgment and make it more difficult for us to act in a positive way toward ourselves or toward other people. Whereas if we have a mind that is more kind, loving, and selfless, then happiness is more often the result. As I said to somebody recently, and I may have talked about this when we were doing the Joy of Wisdom book with Mingyur Rinpoche, everybody knows how it feels to be stingy and not share, and how tight and closed down that feels. And everybody also knows how it feels to be kind, loving, and generous, and how good and open that feels. And so we can begin to make better choices based on that as to what we do. Then he says, the way to work with the mind is to cultivate positive and constructive habits and to abandon the negative and destructive ones, which is really kind of the gist of a couple of these questions here about working with emotions, working with non-grasping toward progress. I think we're getting somewhere here. The ultimate result, he says at the second paragraph, page 6, is to attain Buddhahood. He says when we talk about Buddhahood, it says we seem like we're talking about some kind of achievement, like being some kind of superhuman or God, but that's not what it means. The word Buddha simply means to wake up. For example, the Tibetan word Buddha is the two-syllable word Sangye. Sang means for complete purification, and Ge means full ripening. So let's see. Yeah, the first is to purify or to remove. And what are we going to be removing? All of the disturbing emotions: sadness, regret, aggression, jealousy, arrogance, ignorance, apathy, and so on. The second syllable is ye, which means to flourish or go beyond, or the way I heard it the first time, ripen. So sangye means that we let go of all of the negative feelings and problems that have afflicted our mind. When we do that, all of our innate good qualities, which have been obstructed by the negativities, can flourish. He said these innate qualities, the innate qualities of mind, of happiness and so on, have been obscured by the disturbing emotions. And so when those disturbing emotions are rendered inert, the positive emotions, such as wisdom, awareness, compassion, kindness, and love, can flourish. And so he said the source for removing these negative mental afflictions is meditation. He said when we first start meditating, we doubt the possibility of overcoming the defects and problems that we have. And we also doubt that we even possess good qualities, much less the ability to develop them. But these qualities can actually be achieved through the practice of Mahamudra, which he said came from the line of, he said it's explained by the great Mahasiddha Saraha, who was a Mahamudra master. It says, the homage says, I pay homage to the mind itself, which is like a jewel that grants all of our wishes. And those of you who know iconography know that the image of Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of compassion, he has 4 arms. The outer right hand is holding a rosary, the outer left hand is holding a lotus, but in his 2 center hands, he's holding a wish-fulfilling jewel, which stands for and symbolizes our Buddha nature, which, if we realize it, will grant all of our happiness in life. Then he says, normally, he said, spiritual songs begin by paying homage to the 3 jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the 3 jewels of refuge, which help to protect us from the sufferings of samsara. But Saraha here pays homage to the mind, not necessarily the mind we have right now, the mind of confusion and delusion, but really our Buddha nature. Thrangu Rinpoche says, now our mind is often filled with things that we would regard as unpleasant, suffering, misery, fear, and so forth. But these things are not an intrinsic part of our mind. He uses the example of the sun and clouds. The Buddha nature is like the sun, and these temporary stains are like clouds, and they can be removed. At the top of page 7, he says we shouldn't think such things as I'm not a good person, I'm not smart, I'm not capable, I'm not compassionate. He said he said you can't say that you're not these things because the basic qualities of Dharma are within us, but they're hidden. And then he says now if we possess a jewel and we don't know what it is, we might just throw it away. But if we recognize it as being valuable, we can clean it off and get great benefit from it. In the same way, if we value our mind and cultivate it, we can actually achieve tremendous qualities. And if we don't value it, we will remain confused. There's a story in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition about Buddha nature. Buddha nature is like a treasure hidden under the home of someone living in poverty. So the story is told, what about that there was an ironic story of a very poor family who were actually, their home was actually sitting on top of a treasure, but they didn't know the treasure was there, which would have relieved their poverty. but someone coming and telling them about the treasure helped them to relieve their poverty. Just as we hearing about our Buddha nature, we may not initially believe that our Buddha nature is there, but because our teacher tells us we have it, we're willing to give the teacher the benefit of the doubt and to start working on our qualities. I was talking to someone this week. There's a gentleman at Columbus KTC who's getting ready to help me with a book study on the Theravadan teacher, Sharon Salzberg, her book on faith. And we had a nice little discussion about when was the moment that you knew that meditation was going to help you. And he said there was a moment for him when he was remembering something, a negative that had happened to him in the past. And he said, I used to think of that negative thing as being just like an old television. Everything was sort of black and white. And he said, it was almost like I couldn't look at it. And he said, and then one day, suddenly everything appeared in color in this memory, he said, and I knew that I could survive the memory. So that was when he knew that meditation was actually going to work to help him in his life. And I told you folks the story, my story, but I then told him that after I'd been meditating for a few years, I just looked up from my work desk one day at my job, and I realized that I no longer felt awful. I didn't have a low level of awfulness going on in my mind. And it was like it had lifted, and it's like, oh my gosh, this meditation is real. I mean, the meditation is actually helpful. And I'm guessing all of you have had some type of experience of your mind that was different when you meditated. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche told me one time, he said, Western people, he said, they don't grow up with Buddhism. So maybe when they first hear about things like Buddha nature and stuff like that, he said, maybe they're not going to believe it. He said, but if you teach them to meditate and just tell them to meditate, he said, what's going to happen for that person is that maybe not right away, but maybe over time, they will experience their mind a little bit differently from the way they used to experience their mind. And he said that will give them faith and confidence that Dharma actually could be useful to them in their life, and they'll want to study more and practice more. And so that kind of leads us to our 4 questions tonight. But I want to get a little farther in the book before we go to the questions. So and by the way, if you have questions as I'm going through the book, I do feel welcome to type them into chat. That way I'll be able to cover a couple more pages, and then we'll have a discussion. So the footnote at the bottom of page 7 is footnote number 5 is worthy of noting. He says here, in Buddhist tradition, he's at the top of the page 5, he says 7, top of page 7, he said, in the Buddhist tradition, we say the basic nature of all persons is Buddha nature. The footnote at the bottom of the page says, Buddha essence is the innate capacity of all sentient beings, not just humans or Buddhists, to reach enlightenment. We have in other words, we have a mind, and that mind can come to know itself and know itself completely. To me, that's what Buddha nature is. We have a mind that has the capacity to know itself and to know itself completely. But here's what he says about that. He says, we don't usually experience this Buddha nature because it's covered up by our disturbing emotions or ignorance. So this is why meditation is so important. Khenpo Rinpoche was asked about this one time, and I've told this story here before too. Someone asked, well, is it the case that that we were enlightened at some point in the past, and that we fell from grace and became unenlightened, and now we're in a mess? And Rinpoche said, no, it's not like that. He said, our mind is said to be limitless. Our mind is limitless. It has no color, it has no shape, it has no location, it has no beginning, it has no end. And yet, our mind is not nothing, because it experiences, and it can experience a richness of everything. And so he said, because mind is limitless in this way, he said it possesses all potential, as well as the potential not to know its own nature. And he said this mere sheen of ignorance, like the oil slick on the top of a puddle of water. He said this mere sheen of ignorance has covered our Buddha nature since the beginning of time. And it is the work of all Buddhist practice to dispel that mere sheen of ignorance so that our Buddha nature can shine through. So I'm quoting him because that was a meaningful statement to me, and it gave me confidence. So, okay. Then he says, under the topic, why we meditate. Well, now you know why we meditate, because we have to dispel this mere sheen of ignorance. He says, almost all religions, there's an emphasis on taking personal responsibility for our behavior, as well as for helping others. The best way to fulfill this responsibility is to take hold of our mind and remove the problems which inhibit and afflict us, thus allowing our innate qualities to shine through. This, more than any other single thing, he said, will improve the quality of our life. Whether we're Buddhist or not, educated or not, male, female, rich or poor, he said, we have the same responsibility that underlies everything in our life. You know, because here's the thing. Once I found out that what Rinpoche said, when Rinpoche told us we had Buddha nature, my first thought was, wow. And then my second thought was, oh no, because that meant that I had to actually do something about that Buddha nature that was hidden beneath all of the junk in my mind. It's like, oh no, you mean I have to work on that now? Yeah, I was like a little bit like, kind of like the child who doesn't want to go to school and prefers to stay in bed and cover their head with a blanket. You know, Pema Chodron talks about that a little bit in one of her books. So in any case, it was a little tough. It was both happy and sad for me. But then he goes on to say, we might think that meditation is very good, but very difficult to do. In fact, he says it's not that difficult, because meditation is working with our own mind, and who but us are more familiar than anybody else with our mind. It belongs to us, he said, and it's very much at the center of all of our experience. He says we might also think that the limitations and problems we have are solid and real, but in the fact, they're not solid and real at all. And I brought this up the last time we talked when I said, if you can let go, if you're in meditation and a big ugly thought comes up and then distracts you, you can actually say to that big ugly thought, thinking, and you can let it go and it disappears. And if you can do that with one big ugly hairy thought, you can do that with any of them. And this gives us a feeling of confidence that at some point we're going to be able to work with even the most difficult thoughts, emotions, and feelings. Because even emotions and feelings begin as tiny little thoughts. I use the example of somebody who's just experienced a quarrel, that they've been quarreling or arguing with someone, and then they've gotten a little bit mad at the person. And then they're somewhere and that person walks through the door. So you may think that that person walking through the door, the emotion that you feel, the upsetness and the resentment and the anger you have, oh, there's that person who said bad things to me. But it all starts as just that moment of perception. You see them and then you recognize it's them. And it's all just this little thought that gets fed by all of our emotion, all of our habitual way of responding to discomfort. So Khenpo Rinpoche said Shamatha is very good at weakening emotion. But he said you can actually, so this comes to the suppression question. He said that when you stop feeding an emotion, it wilts. Just like if you use a weed killer, you can cut the top of a weed, but it wasn't weed killer. It was, you can use a pair of shears, of garden shears, and cut the weed at the ground. But if the root is still there, then the next time there's even a small bit of rain, the weed comes back. And he said, this is what we do with shamatha. We're letting go and letting go and letting go. So we're not feeding thoughts anymore. So it's like we've cut them off here, but the mental affliction that gave rise to it, our pride, our jealousy, our ego fixation itself is not removed. Our ego fixation remains there. And then that means that as long as the ego fixation is still there, the circumstances are right, the mental affliction will arise. So he said, this is why in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught about love and compassion and training the mind in the bodhisattva attitude. Okay, so that we have to train the mind in the bodhisattva attitude. And the bodhisattva attitude is called bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakening and citta means mind. And so in bodhicitta practice, we actually cultivate and develop feelings of love and compassion for others. The two main ways that this is done in Buddhism is in the Theravadan tradition, the practice called loving kindness or metta, where you calm the mind with shamatha first, and then after calming the mind with shamatha, you train the mind to imagine that it sends out love and compassion first to yourself, then to your loved ones, and then you imagine that you wish love and compassion for all beings. And in the practice of Tonglen, it's very similar. We use the breath. The out breath, we imagine we give happiness to all beings without exception. And on the in breath, we remove the suffering from all beings without exception. And as if you remember Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's instruction on Tonglen, after we receive all of this suffering, it meets the purity of our bodhisattva motivation, or you could even say it meets the purity of our Buddha nature, and it dissolves into nothing and disappears. So some people don't feel strong enough to do Tonglen, but they feel plenty strong enough to cultivate metta or loving kindness. And so I tell them, whichever one is easier for you, start there. And by training your mind in love and compassion, Rinpoche says, if you can do that, he said that will slowly reduce and dampen your self-fixation, which is the underlying cause of all mental affliction. And so he said, Rinpoche said, you can't be developing love and feel hate at exactly the same time. They may alternate quickly, but no, you cannot. You can't do them both simultaneously. So this is why training the mind in love and compassion are so important. And then so this also has something to do with the fourth question, the plateau question. So we're still working on getting to those questions. We'll get there. But on page 8, he says, because our mind definitely belongs to us. He says this in the second paragraph. He said, first paragraph, he says, taking hold of the mind, meaning practicing shamatha so that we can actually begin to have a conversation with ourselves about what we want to hold on our mind. I mean, look what's happening in shamatha. You're breathing in, you're breathing out, you're observing the breath with your mind's eye, and then thoughts arise. And what are we trained to do with our thoughts? We're trained to recognize that a thought has arisen, and we are trained to consciously let that thought go and then return our attention to the breath and think of that as a fresh start. So what we're doing is we're training our attention not to be distracted, but to return again and again to the object of meditation. And each time we return to the object, whatever was distracting us disappears. And when we see that happen over and over and over again, we get stronger at noticing and letting go and returning. So no matter how many times a person notices, lets go, and returns, Rinpoche said you get as many fresh starts in a session of shamatha meditation as you want. He said there's no limit to the number of fresh starts you can have in meditation because it's the process of noticing, letting go, and returning. Because that's where we get our strength from, the strength to at any moment change our mind, to notice what's going on and change it. And so we may or may not get to this instruction, this meditation instruction here today, but we're working in that direction. We've still got a little time here. So he says here, our mind is definitely belongs to us. So we can't grasp and we take care of it. So we can't grasp and take care of it. I think that doing this is entirely up to us. There may be a typo there because we have to take care of our mind. If we decide not to take control of the mind, then whatever happens will happen. But if we do take control of it, we can completely and definitely change our state of mind. I strongly encourage people to practice meditation because the bottom line in our lives is that we must treat ourselves well. And otherwise, we have to be kind to ourselves and good to ourselves. So he says some of the thoughts that arise in our mind take hold of us and make us happy, and others take hold of us and make us miserable. By practicing shamatha meditation, the thoughts that make us miserable will decrease and our mind will become happier and more workable. Because that's really what I got out of shamatha at the beginning was that, oh my gosh, I don't have to think that thought. I can let go of that thought and I'll be okay. And so I began to make better choices about the thoughts that I allowed to think me. You know what I mean? It's like I'm allowing that thought to think me. And I began to make better choices about what thoughts I entertained and what thoughts I let go. And then slowly, the strength of letting go of thoughts actually allowed me to let go of things that used to bother me a lot. And things that used to bother me a lot didn't bother me quite so much anymore. And I said, this meditation is helping me. And my friend, the therapist, she's so sweet. She said, you know, a lot of what makes people anxious and depressed is that they're holding on to the wrong kind of thoughts, she said. They're holding on to things that make them feel awful. And if they learn how to let go, then they'll be able to make better choices, she said, and they will feel less anxious and depressed. So then in the next paragraph, he talks about the two words, Vipashyana and Shamatha. He talks about the meaning of shamatha and the meaning of vipassana. And he said the different traditions use the word shamatha and vipassana differently. He said in Hinduism it means one thing, and in the Theravadan tradition it means another thing, and so forth. He said Theravada, Zen, and Mahamudra traditions, he said in a way, he said we may think that they're identical, but actually the instructions and methods that each of these traditions use are somewhat different, but they all lead to the same goal, enlightenment. For example, my Theravadan friends practice Vipassana meditation by noticing the body and noticing how the body is feeling, and by finding in the body where specific things are happening, and being present at all times in all ways. And in the Mahamudra tradition, we're taught to be present with the awareness of our mind, our mind's natural awareness. Remember that from Mingyur Rinpoche's book, The Joy of Wisdom, how he was saying that the mind's basic empty luminosity is where Mahamudra begins. We become aware of our mind's basic limitlessness. Emptiness is another way of saying it, but Mingyur Rinpoche's teacher, Mingyur Rinpoche said he likes limitless better than emptiness, because he said limitlessness means like everythingness, where he said a lot of people compare emptiness to the number 0. So he said he doesn't like that so much. But the mind is limitless, but it's not nothing. It's not a material thing, but it's not nothing because it can experience things, thoughts, feelings, emotions, perceptions, but it can also experience itself, its own awareness. And we talked about that a little bit during our discussion of Joy of Wisdom. So the techniques are very different in the Theravada, the Zen, and the Mahamudra traditions. Doesn't mean one's better than another, because there are so many different kinds of people that there are many, many different kinds of meditation. And so he says the reason we have to start with shamatha and not vipassana is because we need to have cultivated a little bit of stillness to be able to look at the mind itself as the object of meditation. And he said our mind is very restless. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche used the example of a round ball placed on a table. He says when we place our attention at the first, he says it's like we're trying to watch something that's rolling around. He said slowly, we get flat bottoms on our thoughts, so they don't roll around quite so much. And so the next part of the chapter, he says, we'll give a brief overview of shamatha meditation. And then in this chapter, he said it'll be a brief one. And so this is where I will start next time. I'll start next time on page 9. So make a note of it. I'm looking for my post-it note. Oh, here it is. So for December, we will start on page 9. Okay, there we go. This is what I was hoping to get to tonight, but I didn't quite make it, so I'm sorry about that. We will get to it next time. So what about these 4 questions? I think the run-on mind is the easiest one to talk about, because how can we be skillful in working with the run-on mind? I think, first of all, when we see that it's running, one of the things we can do, when we see that it's running, see, this is the cool thing. Before, you didn't even know it was running, right? You didn't even know that your mind was running. You just thought that was reality, right? And that there was nothing you could do to stop it. Now you kind of got an idea you can slow it down a little bit. And you actually are aware that it's racing. Before, you were in the middle of it. So what I remember from what Khenpo Rinpoche taught us was that one of the things you can do when you notice it's doing something is to stop, halt. Remember, my friends in 12-step like to say, when you're hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, take a minute, take a break, and just be with your breath for a moment, was the way Rinpoche said you could start. Start by just disengaging from the situation and being present with your breath. And then just stay present with your breath for a little while. In fact, the exercises that the Tibetan doctor taught us in Columbus at KTC a number of years ago were incredibly helpful for run-on thinking. He had us do a version of the what some people call the square breathing that you learn in therapy, in certain types of Western style therapy, where you breathe in for a count of 4 or 5. You hold your breath for a count of 4 or 5, and you breathe out for a count of 4 or 5. That's a fancier way of being present with your breath. But you can also merely be present with your breath. like that, And so that, I think, is one of the things you can do when you've got a run-on mind, is slow everything down by coming back to the breath. And maybe even that square breathing in for a count of 4 or 5, holding for a count of 4 or 5, and breathing out for a count of 4 or 5. Doing that several times will help. Then the Tibetan doctor also explained that after you've done that square breathing, he said you can do a quick scan of your body, starting at the top of your head. And as you work down through your body, close your eyes and start thinking about your sensations, the sensations in your head, the sensations in your neck, and the shoulders and the chest and the back, and working down through the torso and the legs, and to the soles of your feet, and then gradually working back up again, noting areas of tension or pain or discomfort. So after that square breathing, you start at the top of your head, make a note of where you feel discomfort, go to the bottom of your feet, and then quickly go up to the top of your head again. And then he said you can use a creative visualization to de-stress yourself. And the creative visualization that he came up with was that your body is suddenly a container filled with water. So instead of being flesh and blood, your body is a container full of water. And he said, and it is as though a stopper opens in the bottom of your feet, and all of the water comes rushing out. And that as that water rushes out, it takes with it all of the discomfort and all of the tension. All of that tension and discomfort drains out of you and goes into the ground. And I think that is those 3 little exercises, the square breathing, the body scan, and then the water, can help with run-on thinking. And the other thing he said after that was that there was actually yet another technique he said you could use with run-on thinking. And you don't have to do the first 2 if you don't have time. First 3, excuse me. You don't have to do the first 3, but that 4th one will become really helpful. He said you use your imagination to recontextualize the run-on thoughts. He said you imagine that there's an archway or a gate in space in front of you. And that you can use it. You can use your breath for it, but sometimes people tell me it works just to let the thoughts go out. He said, as you breathe out, you let all of those thoughts and feelings and emotions, as tangled and messy as they are, just imagine they all flow out of you and through the gate. And on the other side of the gate, they turn into the golden light of universal compassion. And then that golden light of universal compassion fills your room. It touches you. And then it bleeds out across your house and down the street and through the city and through the state, through the nation, through the world, through the universe. So that all of these tangled and messy run-on thoughts, feelings, and emotions can be revealed to be what they really are, which is just basic appearance emptiness, this golden light of universal compassion. So instead of saying, I have these messy, icky thoughts, you can send them through the gate and reveal as they go through the gate that they're actually the golden light of universal compassion, which shows us the transformational possibility that is in us at all times. It's like an imaginary way to connect with the power of Buddha nature, if that helps. So I'm so glad you asked about run-on thoughts, because we can recontextualize them with that last exercise, but you can also calm your mind with the first 3, the square breathing, the body scan, looking for tension, and then having the imaginary water drain out all that tension from you. So there's that. The other question that was asked about letting go of thoughts versus subtly suppressing emotion. I think at first we're not really able to notice the difference between suppression and letting things go. So at first it's going to be a little bit complicated and we may make mistakes. But I think that the difference will be noticing what we do with the thoughts when they arise. This is why I think the Lojong or mind training. Lo means mind and Jong means trading. Lojong. Lojong tradition of Tibetan Buddhism is so valuable because we are training the mind in bodhicitta. This love and compassion and so on. And so when in the Lojong manual, The Great Path of Awakening, in one of the footnotes, Ken MacLeod emphasizes that Lojong is not suppressing emotion. It's transforming the emotion. So let me give you an example. One of the main Lojong slogans is 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue. So what this means is that when we feel an emotion and it's difficult, like maybe we feel frustrated or upset or angry, the feeling is so uncomfortable we tend to run away from it to one of 2 extremes. Maybe we are going to push that emotion down, stuff it down and pretend it's not happening. Or maybe we're just going to explode with the emotion. Just blah everywhere with the emotion. And in neither one of these cases, explosion or suppression, have we really sat with the feeling. So what Lojong encourages us to do is to sit for just a few seconds, not for an hour, not for 2 hours, but for a few seconds, sit with the feeling and then turn it into something else. There's a formula given in Great Path. The formula was written in the 19th century by Jangpa Khantrul the Great, and it goes like this. When you feel something, you identify it and you sit with it for a few seconds. And then you plug it into an aspiration prayer. You actually turn that feeling that you are feeling into an aspiration prayer. You think, I am feeling frustrated. May my frustration contain the frustration of all sentient beings. And by my working through this moment of frustration, may I and all beings be free of it. And may we all become Buddhas, the complete freedom from frustration. So in other words, just like the golden light exercise, we recontextualize our experience. Instead of saying, I am bad because I'm mad, we say, wait a minute, this anger I'm feeling can be used to aspire to more, to be more than just my angry feelings. May my angry feeling contain the anger of all sentient beings, and by my working through this moment, because when you unplug from the unhealthy reiteration of an emotion, you go around and round and round and round and round and round and round, and you keep thinking about it, thinking if you think about it enough and so forth, it'll somehow turn out different. But until you unplug from that repetitiveness, right? Until you unplug from the emotion, once you unplug from it, it begins to lose its power. And as it loses its power, you see what it really is, just a thought. And if you can take that moment and say, may my emotion, see, because now you're dealing with the emotion. You're not running from it. You're not, you're not suppressing it, and you're not just exploding with it. You're not doing any of those two unhealthy things. Instead, you're like, yep, I'm mad. You're not trying to avoid it. You're not trying to stuff it down or explode. You're saying, I'm mad, but you know what? I can do something with this. This anger is workable because I can use it as an expression of aspiration. May my anger contain the anger of all beings. See, but what this means, though, is we have to be motivated to do this when we feel angry. At first, most of our anger is going to get away from us. But even if we just catch one a day and we can use it in this formula, and we see it lose its power, then we're going to feel like, wait a minute, I can actually do this with other emotions too. And the more we are able to do it, the more we're able to do it. And then we recontextualize all of the things that are happening in our mind into aspirations for being more and becoming more. Being big enough to deal with and work with potentially all of it. So anyway, that is the difference between suppression and letting go, is the formula. The formula is what allows us to let go of an emotion without suppressing it. And I don't off the top of my head remember which footnote he says this in. So I'm sorry, I can't help you on this, but it's in here. I know it's in here. I'm going to say that it is probably in somewhere. I think it's going to be somewhere around, footnote number 58, footnote number 59. Anyhow, just look through the footnotes, you'll find it. Now we have two more questions and we're at the bottom of the hour, so stay with me. The last two questions have to do with both wanting progress in your meditation and being afraid of grasping after progress. Both of them are the same. When you reach a plateau in meditation, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said this does happen. Plateaus can happen. And he said that's why it's very important to add in Tonglen, or loving kindness meditation, at some point. You add maybe he says it should be a short meditation. So I tell people, he didn't say how short was. So I said, just start with 5 minutes of Tonglen and then see how you feel. And even if that's all you can maintain is 5 minutes, hey, you're doing it. Because he said that will give you training in love and compassion that will help you go beyond your plateau. He said, until a person really undertakes the Mahamudra practice discipline, he said that they may actually reach a plateau and not be able to go beyond it and get discouraged and then give up meditating. He said the things that will stretch you past your plateau are the other meditations, basically. And he didn't enumerate them, but I can say that they are Tonglen and deity meditation and mantra meditation. Those are two things that will stretch us past that. Because deity meditation, and by the way, KTD is going to start a 10-week series on deity meditation in January, so watch for your newsletter, because we're going to be teaching on Wednesday nights. We're going to be teaching all the nuts and bolts of deity meditation, why we do it, and how it's a secret. This is a joke. How it is a stealth meditation on Buddha nature. I mean, look at it. You're visualizing yourself as a Buddha or Bodhisattva made of light and empty inside. Mind is empty luminosity, Mingyur Rinpoche said. Anyway, Dalai Lama and Bokar Rinpoche both agree that visualizing yourself as a Buddha and Bodhisattva is symbolic meditation on the nature of your mind. So we're going to have some fun with that. So those things can stretch you a little bit, but then gradually you'll if you're really interested in Mahamudra meditation, that's going to be the real deal, so to speak. And starting with the Mahamudra Nundro or preliminary practice, that's when you first start learning Mahamudra meditation, and you get to do a little bit of Mahamudra meditation every day. And then you start reading the life stories of all the great masters, and that inspires you. So there's a lot of things that can help keep you going. Also, working with any Lama or meditation teacher can also help you work through a plateau and stay encouraged. So I encourage people to meet with meditation instructors and teachers to help work through what's going on in your practice. And then the grasping for results, yeah, that's kind of like the same situation. You have to use bodhicitta to really guide your practice. If you don't think that bodhicitta is important, then this is a good time to reacquaint yourself with bodhicitta. If you like, because grasping is associated with egotism, and bodhicitta meditation will help you transform egotism. And then you won't have to worry about whether being interested in your progress is grasping or not, because you get to really, when you start doing bodhicitta meditation, you really become, in a very granular fashion, aware of your selfish motivation. Thrangu Rinpoche said this, when you start practicing bodhicitta, he says, you're taught to look at your motivation all the time. And he said, and if you don't like your motivation, change it. He said, you can actually do that. If you look at your motivation and you find, yes, I'm grasping for results, don't worry. It's not bad. In that you noticed it. It's bad to maintain it, but it's not bad to notice it and then work with it and let it go. So noticing it and letting go is the key to not being trapped by grasping for results. You have to notice that you're doing it and then let it go. There are 3 ways to let it go. One way is to look into the nature of the mind that is feeling that feeling. Like, oh, where is the mind? What color is the mind that's grasping after results? And if you then suddenly see the empty luminosity of mind, fantastic. You don't have to worry about grasping after results anymore. But if you're still grasping, even after you try to look at the mind and you can't see it, then you go to Lojong. This was Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's protocol. Start with Mahamudra. If you can look at the nature of mind in the midst of any emotion, and grasping after results is an emotion, it's a self-grasping thing. If you notice you're doing it, look at the nature of your mind, and if that doesn't allow it to dissipate, then he said, use the 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue slogan on it, and turn that nasty grasping into an aspiration that all beings go beyond grasping. And then finally, if it's still stubbornly there, say, I'm going to make a joke, okay? It's a Christian joke, pardon me. Get thee behind me, Satan. In other words, say, grasping, take a walk. I'm not doing you today. So he actually said that. He said, just turn away from it. Just turn away from it. Change the subject. Go do something else. So those are 3 ways that you can work with that feeling of grasping and have it not be a problem for you. So if you want to read more about that, there's a section on this in the book Creation and Completion, the commentary by Thrangu Rinpoche. He talks about these 3 ways of dealing with mental affliction. Mingyur Rinpoche is doing a whole seminar, or he did a whole seminar on it last week. So anyway, these 3 things, and it's all from Creation and Completion. So I hope that helps. I think I answered all 4 questions. Sorry, I kept you 10 minutes after class. Now I have to stay behind and clap the erasers. And if you remember that, you are old. Okay? So we'll have to end with just a tiny like a 2-minute meditation. Are you okay? Are you okay for 2 minutes of meditation? You all right? All right. Yeah, I had too much to cover tonight. It's a problem. Let's see. Are you doing a book study on faith? Yes. Yes. The faith book by Sharon Salzberg, and we haven't organized it yet. The guy who's reading it, oh gosh, and Lisa said, is there a wrong way to meditate? Ooh, that's a deeper question. We should talk about that, okay? But could you, Lisa, could you remember that question and let's start with that next time? Is that all right?
Okay, that'd be great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
if you don't mind, please, because I'll
I don't
forget.
mind. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll make
I'll
sure.
forget because I'd love to start with that next time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So whether we're doing it right or wrong, let's just try right now. Let's sit for a minute and allow our mind to rest. Okay, that's our 1.5-minute meditation. You guys are the best. Let's dedicate the merit. We dedicate the merit of this session to all sentient beings. May all beings everywhere be free from suffering and come to happiness, especially those who are in conflict zones around the world, those incarcerated, and those who are ill and dying. May all beings everywhere be free of suffering and become Buddhas. Through this merit, may all achieve the omniscience of Buddhahood. May it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, Lama
Guys,
Kathy.
yeah, you guys are the best. Oh, Mani Padme Hung.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving. Okay,
Nice.
take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.